Okay, I'm going to try to work through this pretty quick to try to get to lunch faster. Anyhow, so I'm going to talk about single position lateral decubitus surgery. Prone transpsoas is not the only single position. So when we talk about what the state of Zen looks like for an experienced lateral surgeon, the ultimate like nirvana for us is workflow efficiency, right? That's what all your experienced surgeons, that's the next step. That's the hardest step that you're going to be chasing your whole life. And I'm 5 years into my practice, and that's kind of, first learn how to do the surgeries, and then you learn how to manage your staff and this and that. And then you're just constantly seeking how to do things more efficiently. And there's a lot of things you can't control, but, single position is the ultimate workflow efficiency, whether it be in a prone position or a lateral position, because you allow people to do multiple things at the same time. And really, for me, in a lateral decubitus position, that workflow efficiency comes from the flip time, which in an experienced location with staff, OR staff, can be pretty quick in most places, but also the fact that closing wise, you can be doing the final touches of your posterior surgery while your assistant is closing the lateral or oblique incision. So single position lateral decubitus surgery has been well described. Outcomes are good. And this chart is basically how I think going into single position surgery. Now, I am disclosure. I do 95% of my laterals as trans-psoas, direct lateral. I do some OLIF when the anatomy calls for it from the front. And I've done probably 3-4 prone trans-psoas in my career earlier on, but just for me, I was familiar with the lateral surgery. It is such a great surgery. I was familiar with the positioning. I was familiar with the x-rays. And so that was a benefit for me. As far as the ergonomics go, I wear my loops when I do my surgeries. I really like to just continue to look in there, and craning my head back and working above my shoulders. And I understand that there are ways to get around this, and people do it very well, very ergonomically, but it just didn't feel right to me. So setup certainly easier in prone, and I think much more reliable in prone. So that's a benefit. That retractor stability, that's the thing that everyone talks about with the prone. The danger is that, you're fighting gravity. The larger patients, it's deeper in. So you're always constantly having to try to figure out a way to keep your retractor in the same position and not drift anterior, where there are the catastrophic complications that we never want to achieve in spine surgery. And then, you talk about positional lordosis, right? I think that's relatively understated. But for me, I put that asterisk there because I think in cases where I really feel that I am going to need to do an posterior column osteotomy of some sort, I'm planning to flip them anyway, number one. And as a private practice surgeon, I'm not having a fellow do the PCOs while I'm doing the lateral, so it doesn't have the same benefit to me. And quite honestly, for 1-2 level surgeries, even deformities, which I often stage, I have never or rarely ever, after lateral interbody surgery, said, oh man, I wish I had done this prone so I could have gotten more lordosis out of that singular level without the posterior instrumentation. And then as far as risk go, I understand this is contrary to the actual data that Dr. Taylor was showing at the beginning of the day, but this is how myself, as a young intermediate surgeon, thinks about the risks of the procedure going in. So when I'm doing it in the lateral decubitus surgery, all of my cognitive load is making sure that my navigation, my robot is accurate for the screws, right? That screw risk is extremely low. Even in the lateral decubitus position, published rates of like actual screw complications are way less than 5%, usually less than 1%. However, if you think, my mind, where it's going when I'm choosing to do these surgeries in the prone position is, oh man, if I drift anterior, especially in a bigger person, I've got gut, I've got blood vessels, I've got things that I cannot fix, right? So Speaking of that, going back to my earlier point, this is just a graphic depicting, the Newton term of standing on the shoulders of giants. It took a long time to get the lateral position to where we are now. It is such a reproducible, great procedure. And I know it also seems sort of contradictory to Dr. Taylor's point, but, for something that is so good, we definitely need people that are constantly evolving it over time. But for the most of us, if you're able to do something reliably, efficiently, with good results for people, then some of that you should be continuing to provide for your community, right? So that's not to say don't explore other options, but I think that the single position decubitus lateral also to me is an evolution of the lateral in a different direction, right? You see like the whole Darwin's like birds with like the sippers and the crushers and the probing beaks, right? Well, this, instead of going prone in an efficiency, in an effort to chase efficiency, this is utilizing and enabling technology to allow you to perform your posterior-based stabilization in an efficient fashion. So I'm going to go through a case I did actually this previous week, just to demonstrate my workflow and kind of give you guys an idea what this. So this is a 300-pound, 43 BMI work comp patient I actually inherited that has an L4 radiculopathy after a fall from work, right? And these work comp patients, we know how difficult they are. I did a transforaminal epidural. I can't get them better. And it's weird that it's L4, but it is in this case. He's an isthmic spondy, and you can see the size of the belly and all that. So, in a lateral decubitus position, you guys all understand, how important it is to get people positioned securely to the table. With the single position with the robot or nav, the down screws, in this case is a right lateral decubitus, so the right-sided screws where you have to drop your hand across the table. You can't have that patient in the middle. You want to put them preferentially towards the back of the table. Now, they don't need to be falling off the table, because a lot of the times you don't need to take as much angle as you would think with the routine like perk screws outside, like completely outside of the facet. But you do need to worry about that. Draping, you want to make sure that, especially in a larger patient, I think this is an understated topic, especially for young surgeons. In a bigger patient, that PSIS can be really hard to find accurately. And pin placement can be dangerous and or difficult. So in a bigger patient, I will routinely feel pre-prep and then mark out where my PSIS pin is going to go. It's even harder in the lateral position. Not completely difficult, but it can be harder than a prone position. The draping, right? So this again, most of the time when I'm doing these single positions, I'm doing an X-lift or a direct lateral. So I'm standing on the backside. After I put in my screws, I'll cover them up and step on some step stools to go from the posterior side of the patient. In this case, this was an O-lift at 4.5. And if you can look at the X-ray here, he's got a high crest and an isthmic spondy that's been very chronic and real degenerative disc. And then also he's got very Mickey Mouse psoas there. So I had to go O-lift. So draping, you got to drape, basically like table to table all the way across, making sure that you have space. If you're going to do single position, this addition of a urology drape or like a U-type drape that catches the drainage down is invaluable. Otherwise, you're just going to be covered at the end of the case, because when we're prone, when we do MIS, all the blood stays inside of the patient, so you just don't see it, but it's going to continue to ooze out in a lateral position. So make sure you have something like that placed. A good team, I'm doing this with the robot, right? And so that's another conversation completely. But everything about that is team efficiency. And so you've got to get your team trained up, whether it be navigation, your O-arm team, whatever. For us, we're a high volume center for robots. It takes me about 7 minutes from the time my per pin goes to the time that I'm putting in screws. So it's a pretty efficient registration. I often am doing, most of the time, the vast majority of the time, I'm doing CT to fluoro, which means that I've gotten this preoperative CT and all I need to do is take a couple of shots to get in. You can see the orientation of the C-arm. It's very different, right? Like it's flipped. You have to flip a couple of the joints and positions that you normally aren't in order to get across to do the AP and then to do the oblique view, which is over the top. So the draping's a little bit different, but not altogether difficult. It is a lot of setup though, right? And so again, when you get back to the idea of workflow efficiency, you'd think, oh man, doing all this, you're going to spend so much time in that room just standing around. Well, for me, I have 2 rooms and typically all of this is done, the draping, the flipping, the robot being on, everything ready for me to put the perk in. And by the time I walk in there, from the time the pin goes in, it's typically an hour 30 for a single level skin to skin, right? So it can be done very efficiently. So this is the C-arm coming in for the AP and oblique registration shots with the robot. And then screws go in. I think nav or robot, you really want to make sure that you do the screws first because when you're doing the lateral, you're going to be hammering, you're going to be moving that patient, so you can't, you have some ability to throw the nav or the robot off. So always go screws first. This is just showing you the steps. I actually missed a picture. They actually missed a picture of the most important step, which is in my hands. We were talking about trust but not, trust but verify with the navigation. I will go in with the drill to about 10, 15 millimeters to the mouth of the pedicle, and once I'm into the cancellous bone, I switch to a hand tap. I like to feel that tap gives me secondary haptic feedback that I'm in an intraosseous pathway all the way down. And I'll tell you, I've done hundreds of these cases, scoliosis, dysplastic pedicles, just all sorts of stuff, and we've really had almost no screw issues. So power everything, right? Very ergonomic, very safe. So once the screws are in, then you can see here, like I talked to you guys about, it's not all or none. I bring the C-arm in from that side where it's kind of sitting draped out. I have them flip it back to its natural position and then put a C-armor on, and I'm sorry, C-armor was already on in this case, but if it's a direct lateral case where I'm standing on the backside, I'll put the C-armor on, put the retractor arm on, and then go to town for my anterior portion. So you guys saw this from Dr. Park's demonstration. This is an O-lift, so I'm using the two-bladed retractor from the front with the Thompson arm. The navigation allows me to mark out my skin incision. I get that direct angle right into that where I want to be, and I'm looking onto the screen the whole time, very easy. So helps me with my skin incision, helps me dock that retractor, and then discectomy as usual. And you can see the whole time, screws are already in, Voyager towers are sitting there. You guys saw those steps before. And then once that's done, once my cage is in, my assistant can start to close this while I start doing, in this case, a sequential reduction, but, screws, rod placement, and then final tightening and breaking off. And this was this case here. Thing to note, if I'm being super critical, I wish I had upsized this cage actually, and so like I said, I'm 95+% X-lifts, and I haven't done an O-lift in a long time. Different manufacturers measure different heights or measure heights of the cages differently, right? Whether it's posterior height or so. I call for, a 10, which is not the same 10 that I'm used to. Thus the slightly 2 millimeter, shorter than I wanted cage. But patient, this is a 300-pound work comp guy, left the next day, doing great. So happy with it, good positional lordosis, and you can see, a really good x-rays. And in a lateral position, a 300-pound guy. Wow. You could imagine this guy prone on a table with that belly spilling out. That is not an easy case at 4.5 with the crest. And then you can just see, sewing up. This is a different case, but okay, great, thank you.
Any questions?
No.
How about in terms of when you're doing that, which one do you do first, or is there do you do the posterior screws and then what's your sequence on?
Always do the screws first. Yeah, again, I think for accuracy purposes, you're always going to want to do that first, and then for the lateral portion, because there is a little bit more give in terms of the area of your disc space, etc. I think that's and then if you need to spin again or do register again, you can. But I think most people that I talk to that do this procedure always do their screws first. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Great.
So, great talk. Do you ever just do unilateral fixation? I wonder. I went back and forth. It's much faster just to do the upside screws. Now you're using robot navigation, but if you're fluoroscopic based, it's so much faster just doing the upside screws. And the rationale is you're putting a pretty big cage in. If you're using expandable cage technology, you get actually a pretty good fit. And just unilateral pedicular fixation may be enough. And question is, have you ever done that, or what your thought process is behind that?
Yeah, I myself have never done it. I've looked into it because I think the data's there. I mean, there are published papers showing it, and biomechanically it seems to make sense. It's not as strong, obviously, as bilateral pedicle screws, but normally you don't need that, So, and I guess theoretically you could save the other side to do an adjacent segment problem, which can be a problem if you're trying to put in rods. I have not done that. Honestly, with the robot, unilateral versus bilateral would take probably 2-3 minutes, off the table, or not 5 minutes off the table. So I don't think it's that much more efficient for me. But certainly, if you look at published data, a lot of people do it.
Cool, awesome. Thank you so much.
Yes, sir.